So welcome everyone. Today we have 3 papers from the IRSA publication. The first one is titled "The Rate of Spread of Coronavirus Disease Among Area in Papua from March to September 2020. That would be with Ibu Elisabeth Wambrauw and Pak Budy Resosudarmo. Ibu Elisabeth is with Universitas Cendrawasih. The second paper, and the speaker is here, Dr. Nurul Bariyah with Yarlina Yacoub from Universitas Tanjungpura. And the paper is Border Province Dynamics During COVID-19 Pandemic, a Study of West Kalimantan. And the third paper is from Pak Willem Anselmus Tennywood from Tual State Fisheries Polytechnic, entitled COVID-19 Pandemic, Regional Economic Growth, Convergence, and Spatial Growth Spillovers in Indonesia. So I was fortunate that I heard all these papers. I guess that would be about 1 year ago, a draft paper, yeah? Is it 1 year ago or maybe less than 1 year ago? So it's great to see the final papers, the final papers to be presented. So it's 1:46. If we want enough time for the papers, I think we should start. So Ibu Nurul, I think with my prerogative as chair, I would like to ask if you would be willing to present first.
Okay, I will. Thank you. I will share my screen.
Yep, we can see the screen.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon to Chairperson, Ibu Lydia, fellow presenters, and all participants. Me and my colleague, Ibu Yarlina, contribute to the book and our chapter entitled Border Province Dynamic During COVID-19 Pandemic, a study of West Kalimantan. So the term border province is used due to the fact that West Kalimantan is one out of 4 provinces in Indonesia that share borderland with other countries. This is organization of our chapter. Okay. Sudden awareness of COVID-19 in West Kalimantan was started earlier compared to in Indonesia, which was upon confirmation of first cases in Malaysia, which was on 25th of January 2020. So due to West Kalimantan proximity to neighboring Malaysia and Brunei Darussalam, upon confirmation of first COVID-19 cases in Malaysia, the governor of West Kalimantan already acted and appealed for the public in said province to remain vigilant and to refrain from traveling to nation with known cases of infection. He also appealed for Ministry of Transportation to close the direct flight from Pontianak to Kuching in East Malaysia and from Pontianak to Kuala Lumpur in West Malaysia. Then, not long after that, come the announcement of the first recorded COVID-19 case in Indonesia by President Yacoub on 2nd of March 2020. This created a noticeable shift in paradigm, including in West Kalimantan. There were boom in chatter on social media and many other platforms with facts intermixing with hoaxes. And there were also warnings from local leaders in West Kalimantan regarding risk of infection. At that time, however, the West Kalimantan public was still optimistic about the overall situation, with markets, schools, campuses, offices, and other places functioning as normal. Several domestic and foreign activities still continued. Yet, despite of all efforts, first cases were detected in West Kalimantan. Based on information from Health Office in West Kalimantan, those first 2 patients had a history of traveling to Malaysia earlier. So in view of the rapid changes challenging people's life in West Kalimantan because of the COVID-19 pandemic, this chapter aims to elaborate socio-economic condition, government and people response, and what sort of mechanisms and processes used to cope with the problems, bearing in mind that West Kalimantan is separated by a thin line of border from other country, in this case, Sarawak State of Malaysia. So I'm going to highlight the COVID-19 cases in West Kalimantan. Out of all the provinces in Kalimantan, West Kalimantan was the first one to confirm a COVID-19 case. However, the number of confirmed cases in it was the 8th lowest in Indonesia, or 0.5% of total cases in Indonesia. While the number of casualties was the 4th lowest in Indonesia, according to Satgas COVID-19 or COVID-19 Task Force. In addition, the Indonesian COVID-19 Task Force reported that in July, it was last year, the recovery rate in West Kalimantan was the highest in Indonesia, with 97% recovery rate, according to Ministry of Health. Keeping in mind this impressive figure, though, is that the percentage of West Kalimantan population to have undertaken the test so far is only 13%. This number itself varies between regencies and cities, with about 45% of the people that went through the test residing in Pontianak city. So based upon observation, it is plain to see the in evolving dynamicity in the spread of COVID-19 at West Kalimantan. At this point, the COVID-19 virus has spread to 14 regencies and cities in West Kalimantan with differing severity, as can be seen from the figure. As the 4th largest province in Indonesia, the regencies and cities in West Kalimantan can be divided into 4 categories: cities, inland, coastal, and border regions. Data related to COVID-19 cases and region categories are provided in Table 1. Various categories of these areas are at risk of COVID-19 transmission. The urban areas with high mobility and dense population have a high transmission rate. The same can be said for areas bordering other countries where COVID-19 has already spread. The coastal areas, which are from entry points for COVID-19 via water transport, carry the same problem. Compared to these 3 areas, the inlands usually have less transmission risk. According to Bariyah, high population density usually correlates to a high percentage of cases. However, the 3rd most dense region in West Kalimantan, which is Wambrauw, have lower percentage cases than West Kalimantan. And according to Koopman, areas bordering other countries where COVID-19 has already spread have high transmission risk. However, only 1 out of 5 border regions has higher percentage cases than West Kalimantan, which is Sintang. While busiest border region, which is Sanggau, as you can see from the map, it is located in the upper part of the map, in the northern part of West Kalimantan. Sanggau is the only crossing open during the pandemic for repatriation and then for foreign worker and also for Indonesian who need medical treatment in Malaysia. They can only use the Sanggau border crossing. However, Sanggau has a low percentage of cases. And then less dense inland regions categorized as moderate risk, which is Malawi, despite lower percentage of cases. So both cities have higher percentage cases than West Kalimantan. And right now, both cities apply PPKM, which is Pontianak City and Singkawang. Nisura and Kowal, however, it fall under the low risk category at that time. Nisura and Kowal argued that urban areas tend to have more effective preventive measures compared to rural interior regions. And then less dense coastal region has a higher number of cases, which is Ketapang. Ketapang is located in the southern part of the West Kalimantan, and it is quite open to other places in Indonesia. It even has a direct flight to other provinces. So the detection of first case of COVID-19 in West Kalimantan from the government to order students to study from home effective 16 March of 2020. So this is 3 things that I think are quite significant in terms of what happened in West Kalimantan. This is the 3 things that is quite challenging: the education, religious activity, and the business sector. There was also the matter of China's custom of great prayer ritual, for which many relatives from other parts of Indonesia as well as other countries would have come and traveled to West Kalimantan. So for that end, the government issued a regulation on temporary ban of burial prayer activities and religious rituals in the open. So that's also including wedding reception and other events. Unfortunately, not everyone follows through with the regulations. The challenges of online learning come in form of limited internet access, especially for students living in the remote areas. In Indonesia, only 34% of students have a computer to use for their schoolwork, and around 40% of students have access to the internet, according to OECD.org, let alone in West Kalimantan. Students in West Kalimantan, especially in Pontianak, use cafes, among others, to get internet connection for online studies, which might lead to the spread of the virus. So before PPKM, if you go to the cafes, and there are many students there. There are no students in the campus, but there are many students in the cafes. But this might lead to the spread of the virus, of course. While many of them that do not have computer have to use a handphone instead. And I cannot imagine how can you study by using the handphone when the lecturer provides the material. So this limitation raised concern about the effectiveness of online learning. In terms of the prohibition of religious activities in public area, especially during the holy month of Ramadan and also coming Eid al-Adha, the community is divided between worship at home and worship at the mosque or other community facilities while implementing health protocols. So some still said that it is not good to worship at home. But the business world that is accustomed to face-to-face bargaining and transaction now are obliged to use online media. Business can still run despite the slow pace, but there is not enough. The business people indeed feel the impact of the quarantine, which is enforced for travelers, either domestic or foreign. The enactment of the new normal in West Kalimantan last year began on the 5th of June 2020. Rules and or policies for the implementation of face-to-face schooling in West Kalimantan province actually have been prepared, including the rules for regional election last year. There are no debates from community regarding implementation of health protocol as long as they can continue with their daily activities. However, from field findings, there are still protocol violations. So on 24th of August 2020, the governor launched regulations to regulate the application of discipline and enforcement of health protocol as an effort to prevent and control COVID-19. As can be seen from the graph, number of cases after new normal significantly increased.
Sorry, Ibu Nurul, to interrupt. You have about 4 minutes, Bu.
Okay, thank you, Bu Lydia. To overcome the current health crisis as well as the economic downturn, the government of West Kalimantan has made adjustment to the 2020 provincial budget according to the condition given from Ministry of Finance. The adjustment of 2020 revenue target is a realistic one because due to the COVID-19 pandemic, people's income has decreased. Due to this, it is predicted that government revenue originating from regional tax revenues and regional levies will decrease, and central to regional transfers will also decrease. So I'm going to speed up a bit. So although the number of COVID-19 cases in West Kalimantan is relatively low compared to several provinces in Java, the economic and social impact of COVID-19 are present and create problems for the community, the business world, and the government. Tourism sector has been significantly affected during the pandemic. As can be seen from the graph, the number of foreign tourists dropped by 79%. Many tourists to West Kalimantan also come from Malaysia and Brunei Darussalam. So this is the data on economic growth and unemployment before and during the pandemic. The contraction in West Kalimantan economic growth is higher than Indonesia. From the supply side, it was driven by negative growth in main sectors such as agriculture, manufacture, retail trade, and construction. And on the demand side, government still play an important role as a driving force to cushion the shock in West Kalimantan economy. Unemployment in West Kalimantan as of August 2020 was 5.81%, which is higher compared to 2019 at 4.35%. The increase in the number and rate of unemployment was due to decrease in labor absorption in the several business fields. Based on the BPS report, as many as 300,000 of West Kalimantan manpower was impacted by COVID-19 pandemic, including 15,000 of them were temporarily laid off, and 269,000 workers that have to work with shorter hours, and those getting lower income. So this is our concluding remark. The COVID-19 pandemic presents a big challenge for West Kalimantan as the fourth largest province in Indonesia, with an area of 147,000 square kilometer, or 1.13 times the area of Java Island. West Kalimantan is divided into 14 regencies and cities. The health and economic crisis has had differing impacts in its regencies and cities, so much so that a uniform policy will have different levels of effectiveness. Moreover, as border province that share borderland with Sarawak, Malaysia, West Kalimantan is vulnerable to the negative impact of COVID-19 control measures that influence their movement. The current handling of COVID-19 pandemic by the West Kalimantan provincial government is in line with the guidelines set out by the national government of the Republic of Indonesia, which is investing on methods of detecting and preventing the spread of COVID-19, creating social safety nets, as well as multiple buffers to mitigate the economic fallout of the pandemic. Despite such measures, the number of cases has risen exponentially, and the last 3 trimester economic performance index has rated consistently lower than last year's figure. A contributing factor to the development of situation is the general public behavior toward the pandemic. Some attitudes observed in the West Kalimantan were that of apathy and ignorance, where people still behave according to social norms and convention that have yet to be adapted to the current situation. Possible explanation for this trend is insufficient of socialization in the dangers of the pandemic and weak enforcement of the health protocols on multiple establishments. There is a disparity between available and ready human resources or government personnel and the scale of areas that need to be watched over. That's why we need to increase self-awareness from the people themselves by sending simple message rather than using confusing them from time to time. Thank you, Budy.
Thank you, Ibu Nurul, and also for keeping time under 20 minutes. Before we start, I would like to welcome Ibu Elisabeth Wambrauw. Ibu, we started with Ibu Nurul's paper first, but after our Q&A, we will ask you to present your paper. So, in the Q&A session, please use the raise hand feature. You can find the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, and we will ask you to ask your question directly. Or you can also write in the chat box. Write your question in the chat box, and we will post it to Ibu Nurul and to Ibu Nurul to ask the question. Thanks a lot, Ibu Nurul, and this is a much more tight, yeah, from the time you presented last year. So congratulations on revising the paper, publishing it, and I believe that this will be very valuable information, very valuable publication for us in the future as we look back to the pandemic. So your paper is, because no one else has raised questions, so I'm going, oh, there is Pak Bangkit. Pak Bangkit raised his hand. Silakan Pak Bangkit.
Iya, Ibu. Okay, thank you very much, Bu Nurul, for the presentation. And I'm wondering about the social assistance programs, either by the central government or the local government, about its distribution, especially in the inner region and the bordering region. How was that maybe last year? How was that the condition last year, and what are the challenges? And another interesting to me is what are the difference between provinces in Kalimantan? If you can enlighten us about that, that's going to be interesting. Thank you very much for your answer.
Shall I answer directly?
I don't see any other question, but I think you can answer directly for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Bangkit, for the question. For the first thing, the social distancing. Yeah, I think first, I'm actually don't really agree about the term that we are using from time to time. There are so many terms, and even if I ask my friend, which is educated, highly educated, is what is it? Why is it a social distancing and everything, let alone to the people on the grassroots? So it is, the socialization is there. We let everybody knows about that, but they don't really, I don't know, it's quite challenging. Usually in West Kalimantan, we always copy what happened in the developed country. So you see, if you want to be disciplined, you see the developed country, people from developed country. And now during the pandemic, even people from developed country, they reject to use masks. They don't want to follow the protocol. So that give like, what to call it, pembenaran to, okay, they don't do it, so why should we do that? That's also the challenge. So I don't go to the interior region because I stay, already 1 year I stay home. I don't go anywhere. But from the information from my student, they say that it's like a normal day here. Before PPKM, we start PPKM today. Before that, it's just like a normal day. But in the city, because I live in the city, it is, we can see the difference. The enforcement is there because we have a personnel here, and the area is small. Pontianak is the smallest part of the West Kalimantan, but in the interior region, I don't think it is possible for them to watch over. And that's why it should be from the person itself, from the community. That's why we should raise the awareness from them. We cannot rely on the government to watch over everyone. And then what's the difference between West Kalimantan and other part of Kalimantan? Is that the question? I think, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. West Kalimantan is highly connected to other part, not other part, the upper part of it, which is Malaysia and also Brunei Darussalam. So that's why in terms of economy, when the Malaysia closed the country, and we also have a very intensive relation with other part of province in Indonesia, which is Java, but not to other part of Kalimantan. I cannot go to Banjarmasin, I cannot go to Samarinda, I cannot go to Palangkaraya directly. I have to go to Jakarta first. So we are not, interconnectivity is not that good, but we can go directly to Kuching, Sarawak. We can go to Jakarta, we can go to Kuala Lumpur. So that's why when they close the door, so the economy is impacted so much. But when they close the door, at that last year, not many cases happened in West Kalimantan because the crossing is stopped. However, why now the case is rising? Of course, first because of the new variant, and then the second is because we still can go to other places freely. Not that free, but we still can go if you want. Okay, I think that's my answer, Budy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Nurul. I think there are no other questions, but I do have one. So feel free if you would like. Oh, Pak Bangkit, do you have a follow-up comment? Oh, okay. So that's a tepuk tangan, yeah.
Thank you, Pak Bangkit.
One thing that I find interesting is in Indonesia, the information is mostly government of Indonesia, but in border province, what is the dynamics on information and about the pandemic and the credibility of the information? I'm assuming it's consistent information between government of Malaysia and government of Indonesia. So does that influence people's behaviors? And also, do the Indonesians see the pandemic handling? Maybe this is not early, but now, you know, do they observe different way of handling the pandemic or behavior, and how does that influence the Indonesians on seeing what the government of Malaysia and what the community in Malaysia are responding, how they're responding to the pandemic? If you have any insight.
Okay, thank you, Budy. Yeah, I have friends over there, and Malaysia from the very beginning already apply MCO, movement control order, from the very beginning. Means that they at that time on the 17th of March last year, they already closed until now. So they closed the border. We cannot go there unless for the medical reason. reason only. So there is no threat whatsoever, and they are being consistent with that. So of course we adjust with that. There is no bus, there is no crossing. So then in that sense, we can see the consistent policy in terms of how they try to contain the pandemic. And then I also asked my friend over there about what happened inside the Sarawak, especially in Sarawak region. Sarawak is also quite huge, and maybe because of the type of the government, so they follow the regulation very strictly. They said we are only given 1 day for Hari Raya, and then the second day no Hari Raya. So they follow with the regulation, because I think the number of people also matters. There are not many people in Malaysia, of course, compared to Indonesia. So it would be easier to watch over, even though the area is quite huge. So I think it's more effective. They have quite more effective handling in that matters. Thank you.
Yeah. What I'm hoping is that the Indonesian side, looking at this policy, would see that it's that's how do we influence their behavior as well. Compared to, for example, in Java, where it's not really, even if they don't come, maybe they can hear it through their friends or from the radio and so on. So it's very interesting. We have some about 3 minutes for this session. If anybody would like to ask a question or give a comments to the paper, or maybe if there are anyone here from other border provinces, border areas, and you would like to give a comment on how it's different at the border where you are, feel free, or you can just write it also.
I think even though it's already 1 year ago, we wrote the paper a year ago, the issue remains actually, Budy, in terms of lack of socialization, and then the behavior that will not change. It's very hard to make people stay home, because they have many reasons to go out, economies, or maybe we can also see that many people still don't believe about the pandemic. It's not real. It's just something that is not real. Even for people that have education, it's also we can also find people that still think that way. So it will be harder, especially when I said before, we also see overseas they already back to normal. They don't use masks anymore. Then they go to the convention. I think that would be more challenging for us.
If you look back, let's say to March, April 2020, what would be maybe one policy advice that you strongly recommend, knowing now what is happening in March or April 2020? What one policy recommendation would you make for especially for your area?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. We should have more ambassador for telling what you have to do, the real problem, the sending the message of the real problem. Maybe I also regret myself. I should have tell all of my students to be an ambassador for 14 regions NCT, because they actually come from that place. So then we can have a same vision on what is the issue actually. So it will not be hard to tell them to stay home then if they understand. But the problem is they don't really believe that. They reject to believe. I think that's what makes people don't want to follow the protocol. And it is very hard when we are facing the new variant of the virus that spread very quickly.
All right, thank you. We're at the end of the session. At the end of time for the first paper. So I would like to thank Dr. Nurul Bariyah for your presentation, and congratulations on finalizing the chapter. The second presentation, the second paper is to be presented is, okay, where did I put my file? I accidentally closed it. Ibu Elisabeth Wambrauw. And and the time is 30 minutes total, Bu, but that is including Q&A. So we would appreciate if you can present for 20 minutes or less. Yeah. Thank you. Silakan, Ibu.
Thank you. The first time I want to apologize for the late, but okay. So my time to share the presentation. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for today. Now I will talk about the note of spread of the coronavirus disease in Papua province. So I mean, like every one of us already know this virus, corona is really, I mean, it's really something. And when you talk about the uncertainty, it's uncertainty. I've never think there's uncertainty. When people talk about the climate change, I just said, oh, uncertainty, uncertainty. Until when the coronavirus come, and then I just realized the important thing of the what is that said about uncertainty. So that we know the coronavirus is like come up the first time in Wuhan in December 2019. In only like in 2 months after Wuhan, they come to Spain and Italy. And then in March 2020, the WHO declared as a pandemic. And then at the time we still, it is impossible to come to Indonesia because Wuhan is far away, Europe still far away. But what happened in 2 March, the first case appears in Jakarta. In 2 March. And then actually on 6th of March, the government of Papua already recognized the importance to limit the spreading of the coronavirus. But we don't know what's happened. In 16 March, the first cases appears in Merauke. So I mean, like actually at the time we know a lot of big event in Indonesia. So one of the first person who infected in Merauke just come from Bogor at the time, I think, and then they start the virus spread in Papua. So the first time in 6 March and then 20 March, they already declared as a positive coronavirus. And then after that, so the first time from Merauke, Mimika, and Jayapura for the 1 week around the end of March. And then after that, April, it will spread to Kabupaten Jayapura, and then go to Sarmi, Kerom, and then 1 month later, spreading again and again and again. And then I mean, like the government actually is quite respond is really quick. They make a lot of talks to protect all areas. So I mean, like a lot of the action the Papuan government do to protect its area from the disease. So, but the question is how effective the action, you know, because I mean, like sometimes probably they can limitation from the center to the province. But what about inside the province itself? So I mean, like, so the aim of this research is like to review the spread of pandemic in Papua province, as well the Papuan provincial government response during the first year of the pandemic. So the methodology of this research, actually we collect the data from the government, and then we do some depth interview to several local officials, and then using literature review and internet. So I mean, like before I continue a little bit, what is the general description about Papua? So I mean, like as we know that Papua consists of more than 200 ethnic, and then a lot of natural resources, and then we have the special autonomy. But in 2003, we divided to be two provinces as a Papua and West Papua. And for the Papua itself, we have 28 regency and 1 city, and then more than 500 districts and more than 5,000 villages. So I mean, like this is about the Papua. And then about the economic. So I mean, like actually when we talk about the economic on Papua, in around 19th and early, the dominant of economics, actually mining sector. And then in 2019, mining still a lot of contribute, yeah. Probably we same with the Kalimantan too and Sumatra, a lot of mining, and then agriculture only around 13%. So the economic growth around 4.6, and then in 2017, and then 7.4 in 2018, and then contradicted is like really high, 15.7 in 2019. So I mean, like the overall growth of between 2011 to 2019 is around 2.2%. But the really what is really interesting, we can see in 2020 the growth at 2.3%. So I mean, like even though I mean, like most of the province in Indonesia is like may have a problem due to the pandemic, Papua for the economic still remain stable. I mean, like probably the main reason is because we the what is the dominant, and then in the provinces about the mining. Besides that, during the pandemic, the government do a lot of what we call padat karya. So I mean, like a lot of people who don't have a job, the government make a job, so they still have a economic income. So I mean, like this is probably the main reason why our economic quite stable during the pandemic. But I mean, like we talk about all the Papuan, we still have live in the really high poverty, and then most of the I mean region, most of what is the poverty in the area, yeah, except some like a little bit quite good is only Merauke, Jayapura, Sarmi, it's like big city. So I mean, like, and then about the health sector, so we have like 41 hospital, and then 115 health center. I mean, like actually when we talk about in the remote area, the health sector still have still issue. So I mean, like, what about the spread of the coronavirus? So I mean, like in this graph, you can see that the first time the case like come up in 20 March, and then during 1 week they will increase, and then they increase until the end of October. They quite like increase, but I mean, like we can see here that most of the pandemic occur in the big city like Jayapura, Mimika, and Merauke. And then even though there still have death cases, but I mean, like we still have until October it like under the 200 cases. So, but it's still bad too. I mean, like, yeah, it's really bad. Actually, we talk about the COVID, but I mean, like, this is like the graphing of the spread of the pandemic. So, this is, I mean, like, we can see that the spread of the COVID, like the regency. As I told, the first time they impacted only Merauke, Merauke, Mimika, and Kota Jayapura. And then after 1 week, Jayapura, Kabupaten Jayapura, Sarmi, Kerom, and then after that, like the end of the April, it will be spread to the Mamberamo Tengah, Jayawijaya, Nabire, and then March, I mean like Yapen, and then June Waropen, and then the end of the June Yalimo, and then after 10 days, Puncak and Lanijaya, and then 11 July, the first cases come the first time in Tolikara and Pegunungan Bintang, and then the end of July, like around 19 area already infected, but still 20 still safe. I mean, like at that time. Okay, and then yeah. I mean, like the dread, so the cumulative like this one, you can see in the cases. So most of the cases like in Jayapura, Mimika, Biak, and then we can see like most of the regency who affected is like have connected with outside Papua, like Jayapura, Mimika, Biak, and then And then we can see the death rate in its area between 1 to 3%. And then 7 regency. So until November, this is the data until November 2020, 7 regency still free of pandemic, like Intan Jaya, Dea, Dogia, Yahoukimo, Puncak, Memberamo, and Duga. And then this regency is really poor of population. Probably this is the I mean, like one of the reason why the corona is not really impact to them. Because the population really want people, and the population really far want each other. And then, okay, so I mean, like this is one of the action of the government during at the time. So during March to September, the government makes 10 stages of doing action. So the first time during 29 March to April, so I mean, like they will want to restrict some air transportation, except who bring some stuff, some food. And then the second stages around 9 to 20 April, it's like more restrict. They're really strict until only, I mean, like for Jaipur especially until 2 p.m. everyone have to close the economic activities. And then the stages like for 24 April to 6 May, they strengthen the protocol. And then at that time, as I told, the government tried to implement the infrastructure development padat karya to keep maintaining the economic activities to the people. And then the action, the 4th until the 8th, like here, like 7 to 20, and then 20 May to 4 June, and then 4 June to 19 June, and then from 20 June to 3 July, and then the 8th from 4 July to August. I mean, like this is more controlling. But after that, like in the 9 stages, they try to be more flexible, more adopt the new normal, and then the people in Papua do productive activities. And then the 1 to 29 September, the provincial government continue to encourage community to implement a new normal. But this is like the cases, the big picture of the total number of confirmed case by 25 November 2020. So this is, I mean, like we can see the area. So I mean, like we can see the really high still in Mimika, Jayapura, and then medium, Merauke, and then the green one still low, then 100 cases, and then the white still 0, I think, like that one. So I mean, like the discussion for this time is like the first traveling outside the Papua is the main problem who made the pandemic come to Papua. And then the second, that the population between the density in the between among the regions is really impact to the spreading of the coronavirus. The third is about the geographical location. As I told you, it really influenced the spreading of the virus. And the fourth, human behavior. I mean, like human behavior, I mean, like when we talk about the small city, people tend to do gardening and then do the activity. But I mean, like in big city, like in Jayapura, for example, during the pandemic, a lot of people say that they go to the, tourism. And then when you go to the beach, a lot of people in that side. I mean, like people say that they want to get fresh air, but they like they don't care about the protest, the using marks and everything in the beach like that one. So I mean, like it's really have a contribute to the increase of the infected cases in the because of human behavior and social capital. And then the fifth, the ongoing construction project. I mean, like it's one of the reason to, you know, because when the government doing construction, lot of traffic jam in the road. So I mean, like when we stop, it's really from, for example, Tupat will be one way, and then it's really high, then heavy traffic at the time. So I mean, like probably this one contribute to the one factor to make increase the the impact of the coronavirus. And then the sixth, I mean, like too early, I think probably too early the government changed to new normal, because I mean, like we're not really ready yet to do the new normal, because I mean, like as we know, the pandemic is really depend on the human behavior. I mean, like a lot of country already survive and already free for I mean, like not really free, but I mean, like already really good because of their discipline. But what about us? We still not ready to do that. And then finally, I mean, like yeah, I think like my the case the Papuan government not spend enough money to maintain. I mean, like yeah, I mean, like every place have the same problem, because I mean, like maintain and economic is really a factor. So probably that's all. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Elisabeth, to hear so much about the situation from Papua. Again, I would like to invite anyone who would like to raise a question or comment to use the raise hand function. You can click the raise hand and then ask directly, or write your comment or question in the chat box. So I see Pak Heri Aginta from Nagoya University raising hand. Pak Heri, silahkan. Go ahead to pose your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Lydia, for the opportunity. Thank you, Bu Elisabeth, for the presentation. I have only one question about Papua, because Papua, I think, is very special, at least from my data on the GDP growth, second quarter 2020, most of the provinces of Indonesia recorded negative growth rate. Bali was the most severe one. But I see Papua and West Papua, they still recorded positive growth rate in second quarter. What was the secret?
Well, it's really nice question. And then yeah, as I told you, I mean, like actually when pandemic happened in Papua, we not really I mean, like really feel it's happened. Like people don't believe. They say it is what is it, nonsense. They say there is no COVID here. I mean, like, so people still do like they still do whatever they want. Sometimes they don't use some masks. And then when we go to the village, even though we use masks, we have to open the masks, because people say, why you have to put masks? There is no coronavirus here. So I mean, like probably the secret is, you know, the problem is come, but we pretend there is no problem. I mean, like be positive with what happened, like that one. And then probably the economic is still growing, because as I told you, we depend on the mining. So I mean, like I think the mining is really, they have their own protocols and they do the same thing. So it's still continue. And then I thought the government do padat karya. So probably before the pandemic, some people don't have any job. But I mean, like due to the pandemic, we can see, like for example, when I go to the road, some mama, ibu, they planting, gardening around the road. I mean, like before the pandemic, they don't do. I mean, like after pandemic, they do planting, gardening in the median of the road. And then, I mean, like a lot of people do construction. I mean, like, so probably this one keep the economic still continue. And then for the due to pandemic, a lot of tourism growing really fast in Papua. Most of area they turn to be economic tourism. I mean, like in Jayapura, most of area they change to be cafe, and a lot of cafe just new. I mean, like during the pandemic, and then most of people spend their time in the cafe. They want to relax. So I mean, like probably this one the secret. So I mean, like yeah, trying to be positive, even though we know this is still a problem, I think.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Pak Bangkit Wiryawan and Ibu Nurul Bariyah. Each, silakan Pak Bangkit, you ask first.
Oke, thank you very much Bu Lydia. Bu Elisabeth, terima kasih banyak untuk presentasinya. Why I switch to Indonesian. But anyway, looking at the regions in Indonesia is very interesting, but maybe this is a little bit outside of the presentation, but how do you compare between what happened last year? As my colleague Hari said, it's still growing. And what is the condition lately, especially for the past 1 month, either in the economic sector or in the COVID-related sector, like case and number of death? Thank you very much.
Okay. Before you answer that, can we take the question from Ibu Nurul Bariyah also?
Okay, thank you, Bu Lydia. I've never been to Papua, sayangnya ya. So I don't really understand about Papua. That's why I would like to know about the spread of the virus. I was thinking with my lack of knowledge that it will not be easy to spread. The virus will not be easy to spread because even people, it's not easy to travel from one part to another. So why there is why that happened? Is it contained in one area, the spread of the virus, or it is also mobile? And if it's mobile, then it's based on what activity, what transport them to around the Papua, because it's a huge area. Because I never been there, so I don't have insight on what happened about the spread. Thank you.
Thank you. Silakan Ibu Elisabeth.
Well, thank you. The first time I will answer Pak Bangkit. Yes, it's really interesting question too. Yeah, I mean, like during this time, I think there is a different pattern right now. I think because I mean, like after the Delta virus come up, I think like right now it's like quite risks. I mean, like even though in Papua, I mean, like especially in Jayapura, I didn't follow for other places, but I know in Jayapura, Kota Jayapura, it's really quite big the influence. I mean, like most every when I open the Facebook, like every time people say someone dead, like that's one. So I mean, like it's quite influence right now, especially in Jayapura. But I mean, like that's why I thought that probably the density of the city is really impact if we compare to other in the village or area in the, I mean, like in mountains, probably the impact not really nearly tourists like here. I think right now it's really bad. I mean, like around Jayapura, Kabupaten Jayapura, and then Merauke. I think like because I mean like a lot of mobile people, and then people still do a lot of activities. But I mean like this is really bad right now. I think even though I mean like I think start from 1 July, the government already do the action again to strict the activity. For example, for the Kota Jayapura, they will close the activity at 8 p.m. But from the Jayapura, 9 p.m. But I heard like today, they will start from Kabupaten 6 p.m. I mean like 6 p.m. But I mean like actually the what is the action is not really big factor. I mean like because the important thing is human behavior. I mean like human behavior, even though government do a lot of stuff, as long as the people that not do discipline, the spreading still happen like that one. And then I think it's like, and then some people still don't believe. For example, we don't do like lecturing online, but still some students they complain. They say, why we don't do offline? We want offline. So I mean, last month we do like examination offline, but some no. But I mean, like still depend on the human. I mean, like the important thing is like how to treat the human, how we really care about the dangers of the virus. It's the important Pak Bangkit. So I mean, like I agree with you about the situation right now is really bad. And then from Ibu Nurul, yeah, I mean like it's quite interesting actually, like Kalimantan, Papua too, and in border. But I mean like the main factor is like mobiles. Yeah, you know, mobiles we use. Most of us use plane, yeah, transportation, air transportation. So I mean like probably this is one of the factor that sometimes is not really impact to the remote, because I mean like we have to use the air transportation. But we can see between Kabupaten Jayapura, Kota Jayapura, And Sarmi, we can use the land, road transportation. So I mean, like, it's really influenced, of course, with the spread, because I mean, like, who can I mean, like, check your car when you do you do to other side. I mean, like, different with the airport must be really strict, but I mean, like, in the road it's not really strict. Probably that's the what is the factor is really impacting Papua. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I don't see any other questions. If Pak Bangkit or Ibu Nurul have follow-on question, feel free to speak up. I don't see any on the chat box, so I take this opportunity to ask my question. Yeah, about pandemic, Ibu Elisabeth. Is there some recollection of previous pandemic or some epidemic, if not pandemic, that policymakers or influencers can draw as an example of what is now happening? So an example from previous pandemic or epidemic gitu ya, epidemic in Papua.
Yeah, I mean, like, as I told you, but I mean, like, actually we already see that it just really happened. I mean, like, the pandemic and then impact, but when you meet some people, they still not believe. I mean, like, even though sometimes I say, like, this is pandemic, you know what happened? Oh, no, ma'am, it's no, we will be safe. No, don't, I mean, like, people say no. Even though sometimes I meet people and then they say, no, there's no pandemic. I said, no, there's a pandemic, no. Sometimes like that's one, but I say, yeah. And then sometimes they say that, like, I mean, like, you know, God will be protect us. And then I said that, yes, God will be protect you, but God asks you to be wise. I said that, yeah, because I mean, like, even though sometimes we have to give example what's happened in Bible, I mean, like, that people have to be isolate themselves during the pandemic, so they can understand. Sometimes I say that, you know, you don't believe about the corona. We can see in the I mean, like, all testimonies say that at the time there is a disease spread around the world, and then people have to stay at home. This is the same. So I mean, like, you have to stay at home. That one, probably that one. But I mean, like, yeah, it's really, I mean, like, yeah, it's really scary actually about the pandemic. And then I hope we see the television, the information, people more realize the important thing of really take care of the health. Yeah, and then have to be really disciplined.
I think the government is doing, as you mentioned, doing large-scale employment activities. Is that still expected to be ongoing until towards the end of the year? So that's the employment,
until right now. I mean, like, a lot of the construction, I mean, like, the construction activities until right now. Even though, like, for example, last time we have like flooding, and then we got some funding from the national, and then they do a lot of construction too until right now. Yeah, still doing until right now.
That's good to hear. It's time to I guess to implement some policies or constructions of infrastructure that is needed, and maybe also influence people on how they can respond to the pandemic. Ya, karena harus they are asked to use mask and to distance, etc. And to some extent, doing construction outside is still safe if you can do some distancing. Okay, so we are ending the session. Thank you very much, Ibu Elisabeth, and congratulations again for the chapter of the book. Very well done. And I believe it will be a valuable reference, for the future as we look back to this time in our history. So the final paper is by Pak Willem Anselmo Tennywood from Tua State Fisheries Polytechnic. Is Pak Willem here? So I don't see Pak Willem unless maybe using another name.
Excuse me, Lydia, what is the title of the last paper?
The paper is on COVID-19 pandemic, regional economic growth, convergence, spatial growth, spillovers in Indonesia.
Okay. I think there is a mistake in the agenda. They switch the orders and the title. So
Okay.
For that paper, I will be presenting.
So who is presenting now?
Me.
Which paper?
Yeah, the title supposed to be
okay. So
maybe,
that's by,
yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. This is what I got from the committee. So okay. Silakan Pak Heri Aginta. So that's the paper, and Pak Heri, of course, is from Nagoya University. So you have 20 minutes maximum, Pak. I will give you a reminder at 15 minutes.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Lydia, for the time. Okay. So very good afternoon to all of you. My fellow presenters and participants of IRSA conference. Today, I would like to share a chapter that I wrote with my fellow students at Nagoya University, Rakdat Chani Miranti, and Professor Carlos Mendez. And before I start, I just share in the chat room a link to the presentation slide. So you can access the slides there. You can follow my presentation by looking at the slides online, or you can see my sharing screen. So let me share my screen.
The link is not in the chat, but maybe you can put it there later, ya Pak. It's okay.
Pardon?
I don't see it in the chat.
You sent the link to me.
Oh, so sorry. Okay.
The others too.
Okay, let me stop sharing. I think we had a direct chat with Bankit, so let me change to everyone.
I can do that later. It's fine.
Okay. I believe you get it now. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Okay. So let me share again my screen. Okay. Right. So let's get started. The title of our chapter is Regional Economic Growth, Convergence, and Spatial Growth Spillovers at Times of COVID-19 Pandemic in Indonesia. So let's begin with the brief introduction, as we already understand that most of economists acknowledge the impact of COVID-19 to the economic activity mainly can be seen from both supply and demand side. So we can see negative supply shocks and negative demand shocks. From the supply side point of view, we can see that the negative shocks coming from the reduction in production capacity, as we see most of the industries or firms reduce the number of labor coming to the workplace, and maybe they also reduce the production capacity of the firms. That is coming from the supply side. From the demand side, we can also see the declining in workers' income due to the pandemic. Some of workers are being laid off because of the worsening economic performance, and this massive declining in workers' income leads to the shrinking in demand condition. And this condition is not only happen in selected countries, but all around the world, including Indonesia. In 2020, Indonesian economic growth was projected to contract minus 3.8%, at least by OECD. And in fact, the growth rate of Indonesia last year was around minus 3.5 contraction. And we can also see the negative impacts of COVID-19 on economic growth, not only at national level, but also at the regional or province level. Although the intensity or the severity impact of COVID-19 on growth is different from one province to the other province. Having said that, the objectives of this chapter is twofold. The first one is to provide initial exploration on the connection between COVID-19 cases, the policy being implemented, and the regional economic performance. The second objective is to study the difference of regional growth process and spatial growth dependence between two different periods. The first period is before COVID, and the second period is by including the COVID period, by including the COVID effect. So we will discuss a little bit more about this difference between these two periods. To achieve these objectives, we will apply two methodologies. The first one is the exploratory data analysis. Mainly, we will see the correlation among variables with the economic performance. And the second one is the spatial econometrics, where we will see the spatial dependence in the regional growth process. For the exploratory data analysis, we utilize this series of data set. First one is GDP. Second one, we also look at the output gap of provinces. We computed output gap using HP filter. We also see the number of COVID. We also use this variable, number of COVID-19 cases, people's mobility from Google, number of lost jobs from Ministry of Manpower. And we focus on second quarter in 2020 only. As for the spatial econometrics, again, we use GDP data, quarterly basis. And here is the division between two periods. For the period without pandemic effect is from 2015 first quarter to 2019 fourth quarter. While for the period with pandemic, we extend the period until second quarter of 2020. Before we go into the result, let's touch upon a little bit about the previous studies in Indonesia. First one, there is this paper by Muklok and Sahrir in 2008, where they found there is spatial spillover in regional growth dynamics in Indonesia, where they see that the districts surrounded by the fast-growing neighbors tend to grow faster. Then the paper by Supranachar and Resosudarmo, 1 year later, found that in Sumatra, there is a spatial dependence in the poverty incidence. Again, here showing us that space really matters both in the growth and in the poverty incidence, at least in Sumatra. And the third paper is by Hill, Resosudarmo, and Vidatama, where they find there is beta convergence when mining is included, but there is no beta convergence when mining is not included. So beta convergence is sensitive to the inclusion of mining sector in the observation. Finally, the paper by Vidyatama in 2013, he found that there is neighborhood effect in the convergent process, but it's not that significant. So from these previous studies, we would like to investigate whether this also holds during the pandemic period as compared to the period in the normal condition without pandemic. So from the exploratory data analysis, we see first the negative output gap, both in national and all provinces. That means economy is operating below its potential level. And sorry, the lowest economic growth in second quarter, mostly in Java and Bali region. And related to the second point, here is some sort of explanation where GDP growth is negatively correlated with transportation, accommodation, and services share in GDP. That means most of the provinces with higher share of, I would say, service sector experience more negative growth in second quarter. And GDP growth is also negatively correlated with number of jobs lost. The more people lost their job, the lower is the GDP growth. There's also positive correlation between the change in number of COVID-19 cases and the share of service sector. So mostly provinces with highest share of services experience higher number of COVID-19 cases. And the last point is that people's mobility is negatively correlated with number of COVID-19 cases and share of service sector. So I think this can be seen as the reflection of policy taken with, I think, pembatasan sosial berskala besar at that period. So most of the PSBB policy was implemented in the big cities, like provinces with higher share of service sector and with many COVID-19 infections. So given this, okay, before we go into the other result, here we can also see the development of COVID-19 cases cumulative by day, and we can see there is a change between this period between April and July 2020, and finally we can see that Jakarta was the province with the highest number of COVID-19 infection per 100,000 population. And here is the correlation map that I already explained. I think I don't have to re-explain again. But if you are interested to explore more interactively, you can visit this link and you can see more variables, how more variables are interacting with the other variables. So for example, if you click that link, just very brief, here you can see, for example, the growth rate in second quarter. This is the one that I asked Elisabeth, that Papua and West Papua still recorded positive economic growth, while other provinces recorded very negative growth rate. And you can also try to see the correlation between two variables. Even maybe you can see also the regression, the simple linear regressions here. For example, here we can see that there is a negative coefficient of job loss to the GDP growth in second quarter. So you can explore this. Feel free to explore this interactive exploration. And next, I would like to touch upon a little bit about the convergence and spatial dependence. First, this is the equation of convergence that you may already familiar with. So here on the left-hand side, we see the growth rate of GDP during the period given observation. And here is some constant, and here's the initial level of GDP. So when we see negative beta coefficients, this implies catching up process or beta convergence, according to Ray and Montori. Then that is beta convergence. Now we can see also the spatial dependence. We measure spatial dependence first by global Mordan's I, given by this formula, and it depends on the spatial weight matrix. So here we use inverse distant weight matrix to accommodate the island property of Indonesian regions. Then in the spatial econometric part, we try to explore spatial lag model, where here we include the spatial lag of dependent variable, which is the spatial lag of growth, the weighted average of the growth in surrounding neighbors, surrounding provinces. And a part of SLM, we also try to explore the spatial error model, which is we assume that the spatial dependence is in the error term. And then, as we can see here, W is the spatial weight matrix, which is the inverse distant weight matrix that we already mentioned before. This is the intuition of these spatial models. Again, I already mentioned that in the spatial lag, as compared to standard OLS, Here we can see there is the spatial dependence in dependent variable y. And for the spatial error model, the dependence is in the error term. Now let's go to the result. First, let's see the results of Moran's I. Here we can see that before the pandemic, there is positive spatial dependence in economic growth process. And it is also significant. But when we include the pandemic period to second quarter 2020, the spatial dependence becomes negative. And then we see this as the change of the behavior in regional growth process in Indonesia. Before pandemic, following the previous studies that we discussed before, mostly there is positive spatial dependence in regional growth process. That is provinces that are surrounded by high growth provinces tend to grow more. But here we see spatial heterogeneity in the regional growth process when we include the pandemic period. So kind of less or lack of connectivity between provinces when we include pandemic period. And this is the result of the spatial econometrics. First, let's take a look at this part of the table. When we see the coefficient without pandemic period, here the coefficients of beta is negative and significant, meaning that we see convergence during this period. And when we look at the spatial coefficients of SLM model, the spatial coefficient is positive and significant. But for the error model, we also see positive and significant coefficients here. But again, when we include pandemic period, first for the convergence coefficients, we still see beta convergence. But for the spatial lack of dependent variable, it turns to be negative and significant. Same with the spatial error model. Previously it was positive, but when we include this pandemic period, it turns to be negative and significant. So when we look at this result, we see that there is again different behavior of the spatial dependence in the regional growth process of Indonesia between normal period and the pandemic period. I mean, pandemic period is by when we include the pandemic period in the observation. In all, this is just the discussion of the previous table. So we see in all models and all periods before pandemic and including pandemic, there is beta convergence. And when we look at the spatial lag model and spatial error model, the spatial coefficients of each model, which is rho and lambda, are positive and significant in period without pandemic. But those coefficients become negative when we include the pandemic period. So as I explained before, the spatial lag of the spatial coefficient of spatial lag model before the pandemic period implies a positive spatial dependence in regional growth process, as observed by previous studies in Indonesia. But we cannot stop there. To know exactly about the spatial spillover, we have to compute the indirect effect of these coefficients. But that is out of the scope of this paper. But at least we can see that before the pandemic, there is positive spatial dependence in growth, but after the pandemic, there is negative spatial dependence or spatial heterogeneity in the regional growth process. So this negative spatial coefficient of SLM model indicates the absence of regional growth dependence when the pandemic period is included. So it results is kind of unsynchronized spatial growth after the pandemic. So this may reflect the disconnection of economic interaction among people across provinces during the lockdown. Maybe we didn't apply lockdown, but PSBB policy during that time. So as a conclusion, the negative impact of COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia is significant, as we've seen before from the graph, reflected in the massive decline of economic growth in second quarter 2020. In the regional growth process, there is positive spatial dependence before the pandemic, but it becomes negative spatial dependence after the pandemic. The negative spatial dependence in the growth process during pandemic period may reflect the connection of economic interaction among provinces during the PSBB policy or social distancing. As for the policy implications, we see that for the short term, we need to identify the resilient economic sectors in the respective provinces. And then we also need to provide stimulus to sustain local economy, as well as provide a cushion for the most vulnerable people. For the long term, we need to sort of diversify the sources of economic growth across provinces, probably by including the role of the digital economy closer to the society. We also acknowledge the limitation of this paper. We only use one weight matrix, which is inverse distance. We need to consider also other weight metrics, and data in these models are very limited for the complex regional growth dynamics. Therefore, for the next studies, we need to incorporate more variables, including the determinants of growth based on at least basic solo model or augmented solo models, and also institutional factors.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your attention. And again, this slide is available here. I'm happy to collect some questions and comments from you. Stop sharing.
Thank you, Pak Hari. Great presentation. I'm a bit ambivalent antara should I be happy or not. On one hand, there is disconnect between the regions, so it means that social or at least distancing is effective. But on the other hand, disconnect means disruption in supply chain, etc. So that's not good. So I don't know, is that good or not? Maybe we have to think about it, yeah, that there is, how is it that we can still have the disconnect, but the supply chain is not disrupted, for example. So anyone with comments or questions, you can use one of two ways. You can use the raise hand feature, and then I'll ask you to pose your question directly, or you can write it in the chat box. I see Emmanuel Satya from UGM raising hand. Pak Emmanuel, silakan if you would like to raise your question.
All right, thank you for the opportunity, Bu Lydia. And yes, good evening for Mas Hari. It's nice to see you again today. I would like to ask some questions along with some comments, I think. So here, as we know that a lot of literature say that convergence is actually a long-term trend. I don't see any variable controlling the COVID. Is the COVID not seen as a kind of noise, if not a break in a trend? But after looking at the result, apparently the variable of interest, the initial level of GDP, is even larger in magnitude, which means the pandemic may have caused a more speedy convergence. But I do suspect it's because the larger magnitude of that the richest regions, like as you aware, that Jakarta and Bali is among the hardest hit. Yes, so I would like to ask you about that, about how do you see the COVID as a noise or a break in a trend? And I would like to ask also about uh, that the notion of convergence lies in the in the growth framework. Every region will actually converge to a we call it steady state, and the steady state itself has a some characteristics, some characteristics which defines where the steady state is. Seeing that you say that we are we are being disconnected between regions, which means that some regions might not converge to a similar steady state as other regions. Do you have anything to say about this? Do you find something about this or anything to comment about this? I think that's enough, Bu Lydia. Thank you for the opportunity and a fascinating piece of work, Mas Hari. Thank you very much.
Yes, I agree. Because I don't see any other reason, so please, Pak Hari, if you would like to address this question first.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Emmanuel, for the questions. I strongly agree with your opinion that convergence is long-term process, but sometimes we have to make decision with the data availability, right? So basically, the purpose of this paper is to see how the effect of COVID-19 on the spatial dependence of the growth. We opted to use the convergence framework because we assume that in the initial period, we assume all the provinces are not in steady state, but maybe close to steady state. Okay, so because we assume that in normal condition, everything is fine. So we control only for the initial level of GDP as the control variable, as the independent variables. And again, in the paper, we wrote precisely that we have to interpret the beta convergence with really cautious, because one can say that there is a larger convergence. There is a speeder convergence rate because of the higher magnitude of the beta coefficients. But I agree with you that we wrote in the paper that we have to interpret this beta coefficient with very cautious, and we explain that this may reflect that economies, provinces with the large size of GDP tend to suffer more due to the pandemic. So that means that is not necessarily speeder or higher rate of convergence, but merely the impact of the reflection of higher size GDP provinces tend to suffer more because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I agree with you about that. The second one, to be honest, I don't really catch your comments or questions. Okay, can you say it again?
Okay, so earlier you say that we are being more disconnected between the regions. We see that the growth framework, the steady state, the steady state we usually know is in a closed setting, right? I mean, it means that as far as I know, and I see that Indonesia can the regions in Indonesia can converge into a single steady state, given that these regions are well integrated. Now that we are in a state of pandemic, we are now being less integrated and being more separated. Do you have which means that some regions might not converge at all, which means that there might not be a convergence trend. Do you find anything about this or anything to comment about this?
Okay, so in the previous studies that I explained before, there is a positive spatial dependence in regional growth process. But I'm not sure whether they also control, they also study whether my neighbors help me to converge. Okay, so if that is the case, if my neighbors help me to converge, then we can see that before the pandemic, spatial dependence matters for convergence. Okay, but after the pandemic, if you look at the result of spatial econometrics model, if we have to select between SLM and spatial error model, we would like to select SAM model, the spatial error model, because of the lowest AIC score. That is the most suitable model that we have to consider at. And that means then the coefficient of the error term is negative. That means the shock in a particular province will affect the convergence of neighboring provinces. And it's negative coefficients. Then if you ask me whether this COVID pandemic period will disturb the convergence process that we had before, yes, I think so. So because of the disconnection between provinces during this period, my neighbors will not help me again to converge, right? So in fact, their shocks will affect me negatively. So that is the condition from only 2 periods in the COVID-19 that we include in the observation. So bottom line, we also see if this COVID-19 conditions prolong in the long time, this will affect the convergence process of across Indonesian provinces that we see differently before the pandemic.
All right. I see Ibu Elisabeth Wambrauw raising hand. Ibu, if you can be brief, and then Pak Hari can address the question briefly also, if we want to extend maybe through the chat, yeah? Ibu Elisabeth?
Yes, thank you. Only a short question. I mean, like, it's really interesting, Pak Hari. So my question is, the first question is, you said about, you put the link about the model. My question is, the model, we just put the data and then we can see the scenario, or we just see your study? I mean, like, the study, I mean, like, because you said that there is a model and then you can try to see the model in the link. So my question is, the result is regarding to your study, or if we put some scenario data and then the trend will be changed? The first question. The second question, I mean, like, you put that the GDP is really, I mean, like, it's really impacted by the coronavirus. My question is, when you do the GDP, you do the, what is the, you make difference between the small city or not? Because I mean, like, when the GDP is really influenced, as my experience is only in big city, but I mean, like, in small city, I think there is not really big difference, the GDP during pandemic or not pandemic. So the question is, you make difference between the small city or big city or not? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I have to answer directly, Bu Lydia?
Yeah, go ahead, Pak Hari,
okay.
maybe briefly.
Okay.
And you can follow up through the WUFA later, yeah?
Sure. So for the first question, in the link that I sent you, that is non-spatial model. The data is the same, but the model is different. So if you want to see the spatial econometrics, you cannot go with that link because we don't have that spatial model in the link. Only linear model, OLS. For the second question is we use province level data, Bu Elisabeth, not city level data. But it will be interesting also if we have the district level data of Indonesia, and I believe we can see more interesting spatial dependence if we go deeper using a more disaggregated level data. But unfortunately, due to the time constraint, we didn't maintain to collect this district level data of Indonesia.
All right, thank you very much. We ran out a little bit from the scheduled time. At 3:30, there will be a keynote by Professor Kunal Sen. So I think we should close now. Thank you very much for all presenters. Congratulations to book chapter authors. And also Pak Hari, this is not part of the book, is it, Pak Hari? Yeah? It's separate, yeah?
It's part of the book, Bu Lydia.
Is it? Okay, okay. Sorry.
Yes.
So I don't know about this book. It's a mystery. I don't, where is the table of contents?
No problem.
So congratulations also. Thank you for presenting your work and for doing this work and publishing it so that we will have a reference for years to come. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I will see you somewhere in the virtual WUFA room. Thanks again. See you later.
Thank you, Bu Lydia.
Thank you.